welcome to the homestead. I'm Joe Dana. It's been a busy couple of weeks. We've been processing meat, getting our freezers full for winter. We did not raise turkeys, but we helped our neighbor process turkeys. And she actually didn't take very much of that meat, so we ended up with the bulk of it, plus chickens and rabbits. In the past, we have bought sides of beef, Wagyu Angus cross, and the rest pure Angus. And honestly, I prefer Angus. I was not impressed with the Wagyu that we got. But, I don't like Merlot, so maybe I just don't have sophisticated tastes when it comes to food. But I prefer Angus. Anyway, when we've purchased sides of beef from local ranchers, depending on the size of the steer, you would get probably between 220 to 240 pounds, in that range, per side, various cuts of beef. And we would typically freeze dry between 40 and 60 pounds of that. Cooked or raw, doesn't matter. It's handy to have it cooked. I've got to tell you, just add a little water and throw it into whatever that you're doing. It's great. But we went through our freeze-dried stash and found a bunch of beef. So we're set. We are meat independent for winter. And we had a little bit of a frost, got down to like 29, 30. Enough to convince things like cucumbers and basil that, yeah, we're done. But the cool crops, the brassicas and cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, those kinds of things, and the kale are like, oh, cool weather, awesome. So they're doing great. And those are things that will actually survive most of winter without having to be fussed with too much. We might have to protect them against hard freeze, but in my 1 year of experience gardening at this location, kale particularly does just fine with the cold. So we've got plenty of that. And we will, we've started our rabbit breeding, and we're continuing with our chickens, incubating eggs and what have you. So by spring, we should be ready to harvest the spring round of that. So we're set for meat through spring. And then we've got spring pipeline already getting going. And I got to tell you, there is a deep sense of comfort and security that comes from laying up food and knowing that you have it ready and preserved and prepared for you. And we're coming off of over a month of a government shutdown, which honestly I didn't notice. I'm not on the government dole. I'm not engaged in activities that require that particular level of oversight. And I am such a small government person anyway that government shutdown, I didn't even notice. But I know people who were on public assistance, on SNAP particularly, SNAP and EBT, were starting to panic because there was a delay in payment in some states. And it got me thinking about just the topic of food security. Right, and it's one of the major reasons why I chose to homestead many years ago and continue to do that. It was also why I chose to start community gardens in my former community. And a part of it, referring to the community gardens, was education. As a master gardener, I was, my desire was to spread the knowledge and help people to have an opportunity to grow and meet people who had like-minded interests, that kind of thing. But I remember one particular season, we had a whole bunch of single moms that were participating in a county program. They and their kids came in, and we did a lot of hands-on training and workshop, especially with the kids, but even with the moms, and teaching them how to grow their own food and things that they could do. I mean, these were 4 foot by 10 foot raised beds, and I taught things like season and climate appropriate crops, high intensity gardening, successional planting, getting the most out of that 40 square feet of space as you possibly could. And we had a terrific year, and they ended up doing an open house and inviting the community to come in and share what they learned and share what they grew, and it was really a positive event. But because of activities like that in my community, I was asked at one time to be a part of a food security task force in my county. And it was people from throughout the county. There were farmers, grocery store managers, transportation companies. I was there as both as a master gardener and as particularly with my work with the community garden and the workshops that I would hold for the public at large. And it was really a pretty broad group of people that had to do in one way or another with food. And the environment that we lived in, it was a coastal community. In the larger area, in the county, it was probably in the neighborhood of maybe 65, 75,000 people. And it was between the ocean and a mountain range, long and skinny. There was a north and south route out, and then a couple of routes across the mountains to the Willamette Valley, which it was the food hub of the region, either where it was shipped into or where it was grown. And the kinds of issues that we looked at were things like, okay, if in a natural disaster this community is cut off for whatever reason, could be a forest fire, could be tsunami, it could be landslide events, it could be any number of things that historically had cut that community off. How would we do on food? What would be our food security? So with the average year-round population, in my community, the larger area around just my town, was probably in the neighborhood of about 10,000 people. But it was a tourist town, and so there would be 2 million visitors between Memorial Day and Labor Day every year. So off-season, the grocery stores might have 5 to 7 days of food. During the peak of tourist season, we might have 2 or 3 days of food. So the time of year really mattered. If we went grocery shopping the Monday after the 4th of July, the shelves were bare. They hadn't been restocked yet. But it would be very quick to get cleaned out when people would come for a holiday weekend, particularly in the summertime. But we looked at things like, okay, so what's our transportation system? We have 3 vulnerable roads as the only ways in and out, 4 technically. There was arable land within the county, but most of that land was owned by retired hobby farmers and not in full production. Well, even if that land was in full production, could it produce enough food to actually feed the people that lived in that area? And no. And so that really kind of hammered home for me the importance of knowing where your food comes from, knowing the vulnerabilities of your food supply, and C, working towards food independence as much as possible. Now that's more difficult in cities, I recognize, because you just don't have a lot of land, and I am like the ultimate anti-HOA. Any organization that controls you and tells you that you can't garden, that you can't have small livestock, rabbits or chickens, that you can't catch rainwater for irrigation or household use or whatever it is, those kinds of things are always going to bristle me, because that is a lever of control that is unacceptable. And in my view, should be unacceptable to anybody. But, I'm weird. But in looking at this last 2 weeks or so that we've been really working on getting our winter food supply and our other preparations, right? I'm in the woods behind our main living space. We have a clearing that's our main zone, and I'm looking at my firewood storage. We have a cubic mini wood stove, which is about this big, and my firewood is this long. So I've got all these little sticks of firewood stacked up. I used to store up, I had 11 cords of wood covered storage at my farm in Oregon, and I would go through 6 or 7 cords a year between the 3 wood stoves, one in the shop and the 2 in the house. This I have, a completely different climate, but I have maybe half a cord, and that's plenty for most of winter for us. It's middle of November now, and it's been a very, very dry fall. And processing meat takes a lot of water. So we're getting low on our rainwater supply, our storage of rainwater. I think we're down to about 1,500 gallons, something in the neighborhood of that. Is that right? Something like that. But we've got rain in the forecast. We've got 80s this week, which is wonderful. Cool breeze. But we get into cooler temperatures and rain next week. So we'll start filling those tanks up. And it only takes 15 inches of rain to fill us to capacity. And we get 48 inches of rain average per year. So we're good that way. But making all of those little wintertime preparations and planning ahead to spring, particularly when it comes to food and water, to me is the key, the main reason why we do what we do. I want to know where my food comes from. I want to know that the meat that I eat is raised lovingly and humanely, that it has the best life that it can, and I talked about that in another video. I want my food supply to be as close to home as I can make it. When your food is being shipped across vast oceans, it's picked green, it's not ripe, it's irradiated, it's ripened in a variety of ways, or processed and packaged in facilities you don't know anything about. Only so much shows up on the label. To me, that's a concern. And I think this last couple weeks with the federal shutdown and how that, whether or not it physically or financially impacted people, emotionally it impacted people who are dependent on the government for food. If you depend on the government to feed you, sorry to say, you are a slave to the government. If you depend on anybody else to feed you, then you are a slave to that system. And I value freedom. And part of that freedom is being aware of that system and stepping away from it. So, where's your food come from? How close to home is it? Are you eating produce that's local and in season? Or are you eating, strawberries and blueberries from Chile or Peru or wherever they grow in the middle of winter? Things to think about. But here on the homestead, we're all set for winter, and it's a great feeling. Thanks for hanging out. I hope you have a fantastic day. We'll see you again.